As if trying to beat President Obama in the presidential campaign isn't hard enough for Team Romney, the Romney guys decided they have enough time on their hands to also wage war with the Washington Post. According to a report in Politico at 2 p.m. today, Romney campaign representatives met with Washington Post editors to demand a retraction of this story that ran in the Post on Friday. Romney's Bain Capital invested in companies that moved jobs overseas. By the time the Romney campaign guys found themselves sitting with Washington Post editors today, they had already proved themselves to be the worst, most habitual liars in the modern history of presidential campaigning. And in what must have been a big surprise to the campaign of lies, the Washington Post refused to retract one word of the story. "We are very confident in our reporting," a spokesperson said. So am I. I mean, confident in the Washington Post reporting. The Romney campaign's misguided, naive, and completely unprofessional attempt to bully the Washington Post has only served to bring even more much-deserved attention to the Romney outsourcing story.
The Romney campaign has responded, I think yesterday, by saying, we don't understand the difference between offshoring and outsourcing. Okay. If you're looking for work, that's a pretty cruel joke. I can picture one guy in my old neighborhood standing next to another guy in an employment line and saying, "Hey, John, did you get offshored or outsourced?"
And we now have evidence that the Obama campaign attack on Mitt Romney's methods of self-enrichment is working. President Obama leads in 3 swing states where the Obama campaign has been running its ads against Romney and Bain Capital. According to a new Quinnipiac poll of registered voters today, among Florida voters, President Obama leads Mitt Romney 45 to 41%. Among Ohio voters, President Obama leads Mitt Romney 47 to 38%. And how important is Ohio to Mitt Romney? No Republican has ever won the presidency without Ohio. Among Pennsylvania voters, President Obama leads Mitt Romney 45 to 39%. No candidate has won the presidency since 1960 without winning at least 2 of those 3 states. Today, the Romney campaign used a YouTube video to defend Romney's record at Bain, featuring a vice president of a steel company that Bain took over.
We started talking to anybody we could. We finally got some of the Bain people together, presented, here's what we envision. We were really interested in kind of creating a company that could sustain itself. So Bain came in and we did it. And did it all work out? No. Did we make a difference? I think we made a big difference. There's this vampire story that Bain comes in and shows its teeth and sucks the blood out of the operation. It was really entirely the opposite of that. We went looking for a blood donor.
The Romney campaign removed that video from YouTube not long after they posted. The hopeless dreamers of the Last Word staff contacted the Romney campaign for an explanation as to why they were in favor of this video before they were against it. And of course, the hopeless dreamers of the Last Word staff have received no response from the Romney campaign. Joining me now from New York are co-hosts of MSNBC's The Cycle, Crystal Ball and Steve Kornacki, and from Cleveland, Ohio, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for Parade magazine, Connie Schultz. Connie, let me start with you. In Ohio, no Republicans ever won your state, never won the presidency without winning your state. Couldn't be more important. President has a lead in Ohio that is beyond the margin of error. What is working in Ohio for the president?
Well, it was interesting to listen to that ad just now. I haven't seen it, the YouTube ad that they pulled, because the first thing I was thinking was, where are the workers? telling the story. In Ohio, this is really a story about workers, people trying to get work, people getting work, and the auto rescue in Ohio has made a tremendous difference in Ohio. You know, right now, I just bought a Chevy Cruze, which is made in Lordstown. Lordstown, which was, a ghost town, now is operating on 3 shifts. The car is made in Ohio. All 4 main auto companies are increasing their investments and in their expansions in Ohio. We've got a new steel mill opening up in Youngstown soon. I never want to say all is well because there are still so many people looking for work, but we are really seeing a change in Ohio, and that is really working for the president.
Crystal and Steve, I'm going to let you both take a guess as to why the Romney campaign pulled down that video from YouTube. Now, mine is that as much as they like that message, that whole thing about, the vampire stuff, that's really, they'd rather not hear their defenders raise that imagery. And then also, I suspect there's probably some fact problems with what's in that video.
Well, I think that's right. And I think also somebody at some point was like, okay, you're really going to send the executive out to make the case for the Romney campaign. Right. I mean, that says it all, that it made it as far as YouTube, that the Romney campaign thought that this was a good idea, that getting the executive to tell the story of Mitt Romney was the right idea. It sort of says it all about their approach to this campaign.
Steve, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the interesting thing to me is Mitt Romney, before, this campaign, has run in 2 general elections before, and the Bain thing has been used against him in both of them. In 1994, when he ran for the Senate against Ted Kennedy, he lost. Bain seemed to be very, very effective. In 2002, he ran for governor of Massachusetts, and he won. Bain didn't seem to be effective. So there's been this sort of debate of, which of those models holds up this year. And as I'm thinking back, first of all, starting to see it work right now and think back and say, why did it work in 94? Why did it not work in 02? I think the explanation might be this. In 2002, when he ran for governor, he was coming straight from the Olympics. He was being hailed as sort of this national hero, the guy who had saved America's Winter Olympic Games, came straight, back from Utah to Massachusetts. So people did not see him at all in the context of businessman in Massachusetts. They saw him in the context of the Olympics. That was not the case in 94, and I don't think it's the case now. We're not talking about Mitt Romney, the Olympic guy. We're back to talking about Mitt Romney, the businessman, and I'm starting to see in the poll results, I admit I was skeptical there a little bit about how effective Bain would be, but we are starting to see some evidence that it's working, and I think it might be because he's primarily seen as a businessman, just like he was in that first campaign.
And Lawrence, I think the Obama campaign has been very smart about taking a state-by-state approach, because I don't think that the Bain Capital attacks work as well everywhere in the country. But I think in Ohio, I think in Pennsylvania, I think also in Florida, in states where they have seen the Bain story firsthand, polling shows that it is very effective. So I think you can expect to see it continue.
I want to show Joe Biden on this because I've watched him a long time, and I got to say, the Biden going after Bain and the way Romney made his money and the way Romney handles his money now with offshore accounts and all that stuff is just, it's kind of the easiest target I've ever seen Joe Biden go after. Let's listen to him today in Iowa.
Romney calling the president out of touch. I mean, did you ever think that you'd have a choice between voting for a president who had a Swiss bank account and one who didn't?
Connie Schultz, you worked at the Cleveland Plain Dealer for a long time. You've been covering politics for a long time in Ohio. Did you ever think a presidential candidate would come to Ohio with a Swiss bank account?
Well, let's put it this way. It's been a form of entertainment in a way, because when you look at what matters to people in Ohio, I remember the NASCAR thing when he said, I do too know NASCAR. I know a couple of owners of that. Mm-hmm. That's what that YouTube video sounded like to me again. It's not just that Romney's tone deaf. I don't know who's working for him. I don't know. I wonder if they ever are touching the ground in Ohio and talking to people who are working in Ohio. I think there's no coincidence whatsoever that this is helping the president. And, the president's also been enforcing trade agreements, which is why we've got the new steel plant going in Youngstown. There are things that are happening in Ohio that are going to make a huge difference for him, and I think he's smart. He and the First Lady have started talking more, I'm sure you've noticed this, about their own more humble roots. And first of all, that's honest. It's true, especially with the First Lady, in terms of having an early life that really echoes what a lot of us grew up with. I was the first in my family to go to college. And so she's closing the distance, and he's closing the distance with voters in a way that Romney can never hope to achieve.
Connie, you are the first lady of the distinguished senator from Ohio, Sherrod Brown, your husband. And I raise that simply because he's doing very, very well himself in the polls in Ohio, and he doesn't have his own Bain capital to run against. What are the lessons of a Sherrod Brown campaign and Sherrod Brown favorability ratings in Ohio that he has earned that the president should be taking notes from your husband on and learning from?
Well, Sherrod and I, it's no secret we're both real progressives, and we knew this in 06 that you can run as a progressive in the state of Ohio, and Sherrod won by almost 13 points in 06. And our argument always was that when you talk progressive values, you're really talking the values of most Americans. You're talking about access to health care, affordable health care. You're talking about the right to a living wage and to collectively bargain. And don't forget, we had that whole SB 5 thing here, similar to Wisconsin, except we won. It was a referendum vote, and that, I think, really was a big change in terms of the confidence level of workers in Ohio, because that was defeated. It was a huge defeat for the Republicans, and we're riding that wave. I think that we can't discount the impact that is having also in this campaign.
I don't know. What does Sherrod Brown know? He's only running 16 points ahead of his Republican challenger
well, and
in
can I just
Ohio.
say, all the money they've spent against him. You know, Sherrod is the #1 target. I think it's 8-1 right now with outside money. And I'm really proud of Ohio this week that it's clear that they're not buying. You know, PolitiFact keeps saying these are lies, and yet they keep putting it up anyway. So it's been a good week in Ohio.
No, listen, I think his candidacy and his place in the political spectrum is a fascinating example of exactly what progressives can achieve just by talking straight. Crystal Ball and Steve Kornacki of MSNBC's The Cycle, the new stars of daytime, and columnist Connie Schultz. Thank you both. Thank you all very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Coming up, we can only be certain of one thing tomorrow, just one thing. There will be outrage. No matter how the Supreme Court rules, the ruling will be greeted with howls of protests. But for millions of Americans, the ruling will mean absolutely nothing. Nothing. I will explain who those Americans are and why it really does mean nothing to them in tonight's rewrite.